And that's what many people don't realize, is that populists also exist on the left. And it's not only in a matter of the right, and they have always existed in a way in the society. People who exploit the fear or the concerns of people in order to turn the situation around and gain power have always been there. And I think it's quite a frequent situation when we as people of a certain country get fed up with one person in power, another person comes, offers easy solutions, might be not so easy, but in any regard, offers some solutions that are relevant for the country, comes to power, does pretty much nothing again, goes away. And it's interesting, right? How Donald Trump in 2016 got to power precisely because of because he managed to raise those concerns about immigration, about the economy, and then people kind of got tired of him, throwing him away, got Biden elected, and now the same situation happens when Biden has to go away because people were fed up with him, and now Trump is again the kind of guy that's opposing the system and that uses this narrative that I'm against that and everybody is against me, but I'm gonna win despite all of the circumstances.
Yes, but I think you're right. There is this sort of wave trend. And yes, there has been some form of populism throughout history. I mean, you need to just look at some of the speeches that we still know from ancient Rome. There were, demagogues. There was propaganda. There was oversimplification. There were empty promises. That's part, if you want, of politics.
I think that's part of politics, absolutely.
Of course, but there is a but. And by the way, you're also right that, of course, the first populists who were called that were actually left-wing populists, and they were in Latin America. There were some right-wings as well, but populism, as I said, so there was people like Juan Perón in Argentina, Gaetan Vargas in Brazil, and others who were most definitely populist. The interesting thing is that many of the populists you can't really say if they're left or right-wing. One example would be Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht in Germany, which is a probably left-extreme populist party who just failed to get into parliament in the recent elections in Germany. But they kind of waver between the two because the ideology is not the important thing. It is the way to get to power. The reason why I disagree with the statement, well, it's always been there and it's kind of the normal way of things, is because there is one important factor that's different today, and that's technology. Technology and the ability today to produce deepfake videos and other disinformation, which is almost impossible to tell from the real thing, that is a game changer for me, because that means that actually debunking disinformation and lies has become extremely difficult. So in the past, because populists lie, that's how they gain power. They promise something that's unattainable. They come up with some weird and wonderful statements about things that are obviously untrue. Well, how obviously are they untrue? Because in a future where you can produce any kind of evidence through AI and it becomes impossible to tell whether it's faked or not, I think it would be so much easier for people to mislead the electorate. And if you have voters who can't tell whether an event has happened or not, whether it was Putin who invaded Ukraine, or maybe it was Zelensky who invaded Russia, who knows, right? Because maybe we will find some deep fakes that point to a new reality. Now, if that happens, imagine, how are people supposed to vote? Does democracy still make sense if you can't have accurate information?
I think there's always been media, and we can always find ways to influence media to change the sort of information that people are getting. So in a way, that's still always been there. Of course, deepfake, when you can completely change the video or create a new one using the AI technologies is of course new, but I don't think we're quite there yet.
Maybe not yet.
I don't think it was utilized by anyone yet.
Oh, no, it was. Maybe not in the way that was completely foolproof yet, because the technology wasn't quite there yet. But you already had massive election interference in many countries, not just the Brexit referendum and the Trump election 2016 were probably the first two elections where we've seen massive foreign interference and disinformation campaigns, including from Russia. China and the Taiwanese elections in January this year was a similar example. They're getting better and better and better. So interestingly, in Taiwan, in January last year, they started very early to counteract disinformation through education. But the actual disinformation was very, very sophisticated, including a lot of videos. Another example that I've seen when I was in the European Parliament, in the Human Rights Committee, was election interference in Hungary, but also in Poland, by the former Polish government party, the Law and Order Party, who had actually used digitally manipulated images of opposition politicians to make them look ugly, mean, stupid, incompetent. You wouldn't believe how subtle but how effective these images were, and how difficult it was to prove that they were actually digitally manipulated, and that it was a very effective campaign. And it is coming. Of course it is. And it's very difficult also to say whether they have already changed the outcome of elections that happened in the past. Georgia is another example. We know that there was massive interference in the Georgian election from Russia. Do we know whether there would have been a different outcome? Well, it's always very difficult to prove a hypothetical causality, right? So we will probably never know. But I think it's not a thing of the future. It's already there, but it's going to be much, much more frequent and much more effective with the advent of more generative AI.